So this wonderful building that we're in, we get to use this room for free. If you don't know about Capital Factory, check it out. They've got a lot of great resources. They've got co-working space. They've got mentorship. They've got a lot of cool events. So we're very happy that they sponsor this event. Action Design International is the parent organization that that ATX is part of. There's 13 cities across the U.S., DC, LA, Chicago, et cetera, et cetera. We're starting to get interest from international groups as well. They're starting one in Switzerland soon, in Sydney, Australia. So you are part of a large and growing body of people that are all studying this exciting work of how we understand how people really act and behave and how we can use that for good to help them make better decisions. I want to take an awkward moment here and get everyone to please sign in. This is one of the things that Capital Factory asks us to do, is so they can know how many people are participating in these events and make sure that they want to keep giving it to us for free. So what I'm going to ask you to do is go to, on your mobile device, actiondesignatx.com, and you will then click on Event Sign In. So you will get
it's not ATX.com, it's Action Design.
actiondesignatx.com. Should look like this.
Okay, I got it.
And then you will click the little hamburger, you click Event Sign Up, and you will see this.
Sign in?
Yes, please.
Sign in or sign up?
Oh, is it different?
Sign in.
Sign in.
I already signed up.
Sign in, thank you, yes. And you can awkwardly pause, give you 2 minutes to do that. All right. Keep going if you haven't gotten there yet. Before I introduce our speaker, one thing we like to do is open the floor for a flash round of if you've got an announcement, if you have a job opening that you're looking for people that are into this kind of stuff, if you yourself are looking for a job, if you have a cool event that you think we would like to know about, limit it to 1 minute. So, anybody? Yes.
I'm with Technology Advisors Group. Our meeting Friday morning, very early, sorry gang, is the board chair of the Central Texas Angels Network, talking about their group and what they're interested in. So any of you have ideas of being a startup, need money, or will need money, come along. I have little handouts to help you remember us.
All right.
Hi everyone, my name's Tim. I work at Oracle, and we're looking to hire potentially dozens of UX designers. So if you don't know what Oracle is, look it up real quick.
Before you talk to him, look it up.
So we're looking to hire, we're a brand new company, we're a brand new office here in Austin, Texas. We're looking to hire 10,000 employees. Not all UX. But they're looking to hire about 10,000, still have 5,000 openings, and a dozen of them are going to UX. So if you want to have any, you want to know any opportunities at Oracle, let me know.
Okay. You'll be a popular guy at the end of the meeting. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am?
Hi, my name's Natalie. I have a brand storytelling mastermind for creative entrepreneurs. So if you are interested in bringing your message to the forefront of your content, please start registration September 4th. And I'd love to hear your story.
Okay. Very cool. buffering, searching. Okay. Our announcement is that in addition to doing this, the third Monday evening of every month, we also have a dinner that's usually a little further north, which a lot of people seem to be located. And our next one is September 9th, I believe. So same kind of conversation, no speaker, just food and beer or whatever you want to drink, and lively conversation about all this kind of stuff. So it's a lot of fun. Okay, now, without further ado, Kyle MK is going to be our speaker. I had the pleasure of meeting Kyle a month ago or so. Kyle is a brand loyalty expert who kind of honed his craft working at Apple, a place that knows a thing or two about brand loyalty. And he's also worked with and learned from Starbucks and some other amazing brands. And he's written a book. If you ask nicely, he might let you buy one at the end of this meetup. All about the economics of emotion. So just real quick, this is where our work very closely intersects. How many people think that most of your decisions are made rationally? Okay.
Good, you passed it. You can
Yes,
stay.
yes, good start. Way to read the room. How many people think that some of your decisions are influenced by emotion? Okay. How many people think all of your decisions are influenced by emotion? Yes. Okay. So that's something that in our work, it's one of the first things that we talk about, is that it's a myth that we have this rational decision-making computer in our head. The reality is that, yes, there's a huge cognitive portion to decision-making, but everything is influenced by emotion. And that's something that we work very hard to educate our clients on. Kyle has spent a lot of time learning from the best and teaching his clients the same thing, which is that emotion is everything, and it's even a currency.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
without further ado.
Thanks so much, Margaret. Yeah, as I put it, logic turns the wheel, but emotion drives the bus. You wouldn't be able to make a rational decision without the emotion pushing you to do so. So, yeah, as Sparky said, my name is Kyle. I go by Kyle MK because my last name is hard to spell and hard to pronounce. I'm doing you a favor. I did write a book titled the same thing, The Economics of Emotion, How to Build a Business Everyone Will Love. Yeah, it all started maybe about 10 years ago, about 2009, 2010, when I was working at the Apple Store up at the Domain. And I realized that everybody that was going out of the store was smiling, but not everybody that was coming in the store was smiling. And I was trying to figure out what this machine of an Apple Store was that can let people come in with whatever emotion that they're holding on their back and then leave with a smile. And I kind of came to this realization that nearly everything, and I'm talking about roadways, the chairs that you're sitting on, the clothes that you're wearing, the phone that you're not on, the clicker that I'm using, the TVs that we're watching, literally everything is made by a person for other people, right? And no matter where you look, you will see the fruits of our loins as a human race. Everything that we surround ourselves by is made by another person. So I started thinking, in the context of Apple, how do you turn that and make it make other people happy? Like, how can you take your product or your service and make other people happy? That's all I want to do, is just make people happy. And I started thinking, like, well, maybe if we stopped designing for features and actually started designing for feelings, we'd be onto something. But in order to do that, we need to learn a little bit about what some of the most admired brands are doing, right? So we've got companies like Disney, Apple, Ritz-Carlton, Starbucks, Southwest. I've been able to shadow or work with all but these two. And I took every stab that I could at their brand. So this is their marketing, every product, every service that they sell, every support team that they employ, every part of their brand. I distilled it down to one thing, and emotion runs it all. It's that simple. So what I want to do today is teach you a couple things about how emotion drives some of the best products and services, and if you incorporate emotion throughout your entire brand, that's how you can become one of the most admired brands in Texas, in the world, whatever you want. So we're going to learn a little bit about emotions. Down at the bottom, as one of my favorite quotes, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. This is Maya Angelou. Anybody know who Maya Angelou is? Great. Yeah, poet, writer, singer too. She probably wasn't talking about business, but then again, maybe she was. She knew how to keep people attached to what she was doing. So there are 5 core emotions. There's joy, sadness, anger, fear, and disgust. Now, core emotion doesn't mean that these are the only emotions that exist. Emotions are kind of like a color spectrum, so all different types of hues and brightnesses, right? But these are the core emotions. So every emotion that we feel somehow leads up to one of these 5 emotions, but we're going to talk about those in a little bit. First, we're going to talk about how they're actually triggered. Not just what the emotion is, but how they're triggered. There's 8 different triggers. So the first 2 are direct and indirect. So a direct emotional trigger is if I do something to directly affect your mood, right? That means if I push you, I'm directly trying to affect your a bad mood there. An indirect thing is if it doesn't necessarily require your attention. It happens. An indirect thing is like a friend gets a job, a new job, and you're happy for them. They didn't get the job to make you happy, but you're happy because of that. That's an indirect trigger. Next, we have conscious and unconscious. Conscious is something like you can't cry if you're not watching the movie Pay It Forward. So this requires your attention. Unconscious is something that doesn't require attention, something like the weather, right? The weather affects a lot of people's moods, and you don't even recognize it. Next, we have internal and external. Internals are like thoughts of like a loved one, right, or a long vacation makes you happy. That's an internal trigger. And external is something that requires one of the 5 senses. And last, we have positive and negative. And this doesn't mean a positive trigger as in it's good for you. Positive means that it's adding or increasing the emotion that you're already feeling. Okay? And negative means that it's subtracting or reducing the emotion. So if I gave someone flowers on a bad day, I'm trying to negatively trigger an emotion there. I'm trying to reduce sadness or anger or fear or whatever it may be. All right. So now the good stuff. So core emotions. So first we're going to talk about joy. So joy, the definition of joy is a state of well-being that encompasses all positive or pleasant emotions that result from experiences both new and familiar. Joy exists so that way we can kind of find our tribe. It's an internal biological signal that says these people are safe or this situation that you're in is safe. If you're happy, that means it's usually good for you. Okay? Now, there's a spectrum of joy. Like I said, there's many emotions within joy. So on the scale of least intense to most intense, we have sensory pleasure down at the bottom. It's something that smells good, feels good, like a massage, right? And all the way up at the top, we have ecstasy. And in the middle, you see how relief is there, and it kind of spans the entire spectrum there. So you can have a relief such as, I found my keys after 20 minutes of looking, all the way up to the end where like you find out that your cancer is in remission, right? 2 completely different types of relief or intensities of relief. This is what joy looks like on a person. So we have neutral faces up here, right? And you see how the eyes are kind of not doing anything, but down here, they're squinted. That's how you know that there's a genuine smile. If someone's just smiling with their teeth, they kind of look like a psychopath, right? But if I squint my eyes and my cheekbones are raised, that's how you know that's genuine. So if you find anyone that's smiling with just their teeth, they're not genuinely happy, they're just trying to be nice. What you want is you want people who have squinted eyes and raised cheekbones. So next we're going to talk about sadness. So sadness is our response to loss, whether that's something that we already have in our possession or something that we expected to have in our possession. So if you thought that you were going to get a job and you didn't get it, you would experience sadness because you have that loss. Okay? Sadness exists so that way we can signify to others that we're suffering. That's the one reason why sadness exists. Isn't that crazy? It's our helpline to someone else to say, like, help me, I'm hurting. Sadness also, belongs on a spectrum. We have a full spectrum here. Starting down at the bottom, we have disappointment. And then up at the top, we have anguish. And running the entire spectrum, we have resignation. This is what sadness looks like. It's kind of like a cartoon where your eyebrows meet in the middle. And they usually angle downwards as they go farther out from your face. And then the corners of your mouth will actually turn downwards. Your cheekbones are not usually raised. And then below the neck, your body is usually slumped. Usually your shoulders are forward. You don't have the most energy in the room when you're sad. It's hard to conceal physicalities of sadness because that's the reason why sadness exists. So next we're going to talk about anger. Anger is probably the most dangerous of emotions because it builds on top of itself much quicker than any other core emotion that we experience. So if I yell at someone, they're probably going to respond with anger as well. And then because they're yelling at me, I'm yelling at them, right? It's our response to being treated unfairly or being blocked by something, right? So anytime that you feel angry, you have to think of what am I being blocked by or why do I feel like I'm being treated unfairly? Anger exists because it's there to show our dominance over or assert our dominance over a situation. So in the subject of a protest, you obviously feel like you've been treated unfairly, therefore you go out and you do something about it. Although anger is the most dangerous emotion, it also has the highest rate of action connected with it. So that action may not be good. It can be turned into a very bad situation, such as like a physical fight, but action could be turned into something really great, such as this, civil rights movement, that kind of stuff. Also exists on a spectrum. You have annoyance down at the bottom. This is like a fly in the room or an itch at the top of your roof of your mouth. And then on the top right, we have fury. And everything in between, frustration and argumentativeness and bitterness, they span pretty much the whole thing. And those things can grow pretty quickly. This is what anger looks like. So anger is usually your eyebrows are pointed downwards. So like sadness, if your eyebrows are like this, anger is like this, right? Just like a real cartoon. Most people flare their nostrils whenever they're angry. Now, when we took these photos, we didn't say make an angry face. What I did is I told them a story that I thought would make them angry, and they just made this naturally. And we took it with a very, very high-speed camera, and I just snapped a really quick photo. So these are all very natural photos, not staged. Has anyone ever seen this when you come home? Danger. Okay, next. Fear. So fear is our way of keeping each other safe, essentially. It occurs when we perceive a threat to our safety or the safety of others. It exists because without it, nearest cliff would take us out, right? Or we'd see a snake, we'd try to pet it, and then we'd be dead. So we fear things. Even things that we're told are safe, we're still scared of. Like she's scared of this roller coaster, right? Because even though we're told that it's a good thing for us, we're not having fun. We think we're gonna die. So if you have a friend who doesn't like roller coasters, either blindfold them or tell them they're going on one of the teacup rides. Next we have, the same type of spectrum, but with fear, you'll notice that there's a lot more that are on the most intense. There's only a few that kind of do the mid-range and go lower, and that's because fear can usually spike really, really quickly, but it also dissipates pretty quickly. The only thing that doesn't dissipate is going to be anxiety, and that sticks with you for a long time. If you ever have anxiety about anything, it will fluctuate up and down, and you won't feel great the entire time. If anyone's ever been a victim of an anxiety attack or had any anxiety over anything, you know how much it can control your thought processes from that point forward. So that's why it spans the entire thing. This is what fear looks like. It basically paralyzes your face. See, everybody's no wrinkles. It's a very natural response to freeze really quick. Whenever you get scared, you're like, right? And so what your body does is your eyes completely widen, your cheekbones kind of stretch out, and your jaw tenses up. I don't know if there's an evolutionary purpose behind the facial expression that your body makes whenever you're scared, but I do know that it's not helpful if there's like a cute dog, but it's running towards you in the complete pitch black. You don't know if it's a cute dog, so you're like, ha, ha, and you can't breathe. That's what happened to me when I was 12. I've never gotten over it. Great.
How did you incite those faces?
I'm sorry?
How did you get them to make those faces?
I went, ha! Yeah, that's a real thing. Next, we have disgust. So disgust helps us identify things that are harmful to our well-being, whether it's socially or physically. Okay? Such as this woman who doesn't like water. It's basically our way of stopping poison from entering our body or our lives before it gets there, before it's too late. It's a very interesting response that our body has. Disgust, part of that, the disgust spectrum, is hatred. So anytime you say that you hate something, it means that you're disgusted by it. And if you're disgusted, that means you think it's not good for your well-being, whether it's socially or physically. So think about that next time you think about politics. Do you hate them? Or are you angry with them? What are they actually doing? One of the things that I really like about disgust is that it has this evolutionary way of blocking off your nasal passages so no poison can get in. This is a thing that all humans have done since the beginning of humankind. You see how everybody's got their nose scrunched up? And even that lady with the water had her nose scrunched up. We're actually closing off our nasal passages when we do that, which is kind of interesting. Yeah?
These different spectra that you're showing us, are these of your own making, or are these pulled from
This is,
psychological community? Or?
This is actually pulled from a man and his daughter named Paul Ekman. Paul Ekman was the scientist behind lots of books, but you probably know him as the main scientist behind the Pixar movie Inside Out, maybe, okay? He actually has a website that they created with the Dalai Lama called the Spectrum Atlas of Emotions, is what it's called, Atlas of Emotions. So yeah, so these are taken from that. Thank you. Cool, so those are the 5 core emotions, but there's actually a 6th one. Can anyone guess what it is?
Surprise.
Yeah. Surprise. So surprise is not considered a core emotion, and the reason why is because it's so short-lived. Surprise is more like an accelerant to the other 5 emotions than it is emotion on its own. It does have its own facial feature. It's kind of similar to fear, only your jaw usually involuntarily drops. But like I said, whenever you get a surprise, you feel the surprise for a moment, and you'll immediately go into the resulting emotion. So if it's a firework, it'll be surprise, and then a smile. If someone scared you out of a closet, then it's surprise, and then anger, or surprise, and then fear, right? So surprise is just an accelerant. If you surprise someone, and and it's a joyful experience, they'll actually feel more joyful than they did before because they didn't expect it. Yeah.
Isn't there also an inhaling, and what is that from?
For surprise, I think that's our evolutionary way of saying, just in case I run out of air in this next action of mine, right? That's more of a fear-based thing, though. Your body is pumping so much blood through your system to get you ready for either a fight or a flight. And so that's more of a fear response than it is surprise. But it of course, goes along with surprise because sometimes you can
Could be new and be a threat.
Yeah, that's true. Cool. So I want to talk a little bit about emotional interrelation. Does anybody know what interrelation means? This means relating to or affecting a group. So I'm going to do this as an experiment. I've only done this a few times in front of groups, and they haven't failed me yet. So here's a test. So I'm going to draw out the facial features of the 5 core emotions here. We got joy, sadness, anger. We'll do fear. Actually, that's more fear. And disgust. Can everyone see that? Yeah? Cool. I'm going to draw the same 5 over here, so you're not missing anything. So, while I'm doing this, I want you guys to think of those triggers that we talked about a little bit before. Oh no. If I were to come at you and start yelling at you, telling you that I hated you, which one of these 5 emotions do you think you'll respond with naturally? Anger? Yeah, sure. Anger. Anything else?
Could be fear.
Could be fear. Yeah, you're like, why do you hate me? What did I do?
Sadness.
Sadness.
You might be sad that someone hates you. Cool. Anything else?
Probably a mix of all.
A mix of all of them? Do you think that you'd be happy if someone said that they hated you?
Sometimes.
Depends on the person. Alright, we'll leave that for a little bit later. Alright, we'll move up to this one. What about fear? What if I just like got you really scared about something? I was just like, I don't know if I can do this, and I don't think you should either. Like, I don't leave the house. It's really like, how do you think you would feel? How would you respond? Anger? You'd be like, shut up? Yeah. What else?
Fear.
Fear? Yeah, you probably respond in the like. You get really scared. This is what commercials do, by the way. They get you really scared about stuff, and then they're like, but we have the solution. It only kills 99.9% of germs, but we've got it. Anything else for fear?
Sadness.
Maybe sadness, yeah. Cool. Okay, let's move on to anger. If I just started yelling at you, I'm not saying that I hate you, I'm just mad at you. How do you think you would respond naturally? Disgust? Yeah. You'd be like, shut up. What else?
Sad.
Maybe be sad that someone's yelling at you? Yeah. Doesn't feel great. Anything else?
If I just pulled a prank on you, probably joy.
If you pull a prank?
Yeah.
But if they're just yelling at you and you have no idea why,
I'd be angry back at them.
you'd be angry? Yeah, I'd probably be angry too. Alright, let's move on. What about sadness? I start crying, you feel bad for me. How do you think you would respond?
Small. You wanna get
Sad? Okay, we'll put sad. And you said smile. And it is because you want to make them feel better. Yeah, okay. What else? Anything else? Is anybody angry when they see someone cry? Maybe if they cry a lot. You're like, okay, get over it. It's been 6 months. Let them go. It's a hamster. Okay, what about fear? Is anybody fearful that maybe you're the reason why they're sad? Disgusted? You're like, ugh, you're gross when you cry. Yeah, okay, so we'll just put all of them. Okay, now joy. Now someone comes at you and they're smiling and they're happy and they're asking you how your day is, and maybe they give you a gift, I don't know. How do you think that you'll respond naturally?
Joy.
Joy. Any weirdos in the room that would respond otherwise?
You could be sad if you were already sad and you're jealous.
You could be sad, yeah, it could be a reverse situation of this, right? Yeah, that's true. I'll put it there, just for you. Cool, yeah, that's kind of what I came up with here. I think that that emotions interrelate more than we know. That they actually, others' emotions affect us every day, all day. Whether this be your boss, your significant other, a family member, or a friend, whatever you do affects the others around you, and whatever they do affects you, and this is kind of an unconscious thing. This is not a trigger that you necessarily are aware of, but it is something that does occur. So, to prove my point, I'm just going to watch a little video. I wonder what the auditions were for that. It's like, we just need you to laugh uncontrollably. You're not laughing at anything. It's just that you're just going to look like a lunatic on the subway. And he's like, I got this. My favorite part about that video is watching the audience because everybody smiles and laughs and the thing. But yeah, that's just proof that that emotions interlink. In fact, one of the things that I wish would occur is that we'd find some way to quantify emotion, so that way we can actually prove that emotions kind of run everything that we do. We'd be able to look at, hey, I was happy during this day, and that's actually when I was most productive. Or I was sad, and therefore I lost a good friend. You'd be able to look back and see, how was I feeling when a certain event had occurred. So because that doesn't exist, I want you to just put on your imagination caps for a moment. And we're going to think about just a normal morning. And if I were to hook you up to like an EKG, an emotional... Good. I'm glad that we're there, though. If we were to hook ourselves up to an imaginary EKG that tells us what emotion we were feeling and when, I have a feeling that it would look something like this. Emotions all over the place. Right? Now, in my head, when I was creating this, I was thinking like, okay, if this was the morning, you were sleeping, so the kind of natural or neutral, right? But then you stub your toe. So anger goes up. And a little disgust because you hate that fucking bed. And you're not happy, right? But then you have to go to the bathroom, so there's a little relief there, and that's a little uptick on the yellow. And then you remember that there's cookies, and no one discourages morning cookies, so you go and you pick out a cookie, so you see how sadness and anger and disgust and fear all go down a little bit, but the yellow one, joy, goes up. You're happy about the cookies, but then all of a sudden, oh no, what happened? They're bad cookies. So disgust goes up, fear right after that, because you're like, am I going to get sick? Is this going to ruin the rest of my day? I don't know. Then things start to peter off, kind of go back to neutral, and then you remember, hey, I'm going to go on vacation. So a couple things dip here, and joy goes up. But then you remember, I don't have any money. So it goes down and sadness goes up because you haven't been working hard enough to go on the vacation and you just ate a bad cookie, so you could have a bad day ahead of you. And then things go a little wayward from there. So that's just the morning. If we were to just hook ourselves up to the emotion. It's a lot of emotion to feel. And it may not be super strong. You might not feel it as a strong emotion, but it's definitely there. Yeah?
Why are there more negative emotions? Because I feel joy is the only positive one. Is it related with being wired to be more negative?
No, I think it's easier to find the negative than it is the positive. If you have a friend who can find like the silver lining in a cloud, keep that friend. You want that friend, right?
Evolutionarily,
Yeah,
I mean,
it
fear
all goes
is...
back to the Serengeti.
Survival.
Yeah, it's all about survival.
Right.
Right? So joy tells us when we're safe. Everything else tells us when we're not safe. All right, so if I were to do the same experiment, but I was going to apply it to that video, this would, and I'm only going to do joy here, this would be the joy line of the iPad guy. Right? He gets on the subway, and he's happy, and he's smiling, and whatever. Right? And if we were to hook everybody on that subway to the same EKG system, they'd start off all at different places, but they'd all trend upwards because of that guy. And I'd say even watching that video, some of you also trended upwards, right? What does that look like to you? Stock market? Yeah. I did not pay him to say that. Yeah, so if all of us in the room, if we were all to hook up, so this is how different everybody is, right? Some of us have stuff going up, some going down. There's a lot of us that are going through things that the others don't know about, even though we're close friends. So you see how it kind of naturally is neutral. Some of them are high or some are low, but you have this big block in the center. And if you were to just draw a line, it would just be right down there in the center. But yeah, it looks a lot like a stock market. Stocks go up, stocks go down. We might trade a stock by making someone smile. Right? They buy into our joy and they buy it. It's essentially an economy, right? Every emotion that we share, we're essentially trading that emotion for something else. Now, we're not trading an emotion for a car or for a pizza. That would be great. But we are using our emotions all day, every day to affect the behaviors of others and to affect the behaviors of ourselves, right? Sometimes we have to gear ourselves up to do something, and so you like listen to your rock on playlist or whatever, and that gets you all pumped up and happy, so that way you can go into a meeting where you have to pitch someone that you don't like. I don't know. But you always have to have some sort of emotion connected to everything that you do. And I don't know if you guys know anyone, an economist in the room? Me neither. I'm not going to pretend to be. But economy is not reserved just for finances, right? Economy is more about the study of resources and how we consume them and reuse them and resource them and everything. And so it's my assertion that emotion is actually the top currency on the planet. Everybody has equity in it. And it's not a zero-sum game. So just because you give off some emotion and you give it to someone else does not mean that you lose it, right? It means that it's actually replenishing. It means that you're just sharing it. And that's why everybody's like, share happiness, spread the wealth, you know, that kind of stuff. All right. So those are all of the core emotions, and you've made it through the crash course. Congratulations. Does anyone feel smarter, happier? Great, I'm doing my job. So before we talk about how to build products and services that everyone will love, we have to learn why we're building those products and services. Anybody read the book or watch the TED Talk with Simon Sinek? Start with Why, The Golden Circle, any of those? It's very popular, yeah. So same basic principle here is that if you don't know why you're doing something, then you shouldn't be doing it. You need to have a good reason to do it. That's the purpose. Now what I did is I took all those companies that I flashed on the screen before, and I found all of their purpose statements, their mission statements, whatever you want to call it, and I compared them to their top competitor. So Microsoft and Apple. So Microsoft's mission statement is to put a computer on every desk and in every home. And Apple is to make a contribution to the world by making tools for the mind that advance humankind. What do you guys notice? What's the difference between these two statements?
One appeals to emotions and the other is just pretty cut and dry.
Yeah, one's kind of cut and dry. The other one's more people-based. Yeah, appeals to emotion. Out of these two, who do you think is more mired? Who do you think has a stronger customer base? Apple, yeah. Okay, moving on. Adidas and Nike. So Adidas is to be the global leader in the sporting goods industry with brands built on passion for sports and sporting lifestyle. And Nike is to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. Same thing here. Adidas is a company run by people, and they build products for people, and nowhere in their business statement do they mention people. They mention their product, which is fine, but Nike mentions people. Who do you think is more admired there? Nike. They do have a stronger customer base. This is my favorite. Six Flags and Disney. Our mission is to surround the best rides in the world with entertainment from the fields of music, theater, sports, film, and television. And it sounds like if I was a ride, I'd be having a lot of fun. But I'm not. I'm a person. And that's why Disney's appeals to me a little bit more. We create happiness by providing the best in entertainment for people of all ages, everywhere. Nobody is discounted. Kind of an easy one, but who do you think is favored more? Yeah, Six Flags obviously has the convenience piece. You can go to a Six Flags much easier than you can go to a Disney, but when you get to Disney, it's a completely different experience than you'd ever imagine Six Flags to be. And the last one is Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks. Now before I show these, who's a Dunkin' Donuts fan? You're about to be obliterated.
Don't give this talk in Boston.
That's right, yeah. I'm from upstate New York, so I know. So Dunkin' is to make and serve the freshest, most delicious coffee and donuts quickly and courteously in modern, well-merchandised stores. So it sounds like they have a really good thing going. So they don't need customers because they can do all that without us, right? Starbucks, on the other hand, is to inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, and one neighborhood at a time. That's crazy. They make coffee, right? But it makes you feel a little bit better, right? It tells you that they care a lot more about you than they care about their shiny store. And I don't know if you guys knew this, but whenever they build a store in any location, they do a lot of research on the impact that it's going to have on the neighborhood. That means traffic patterns, that means wait times, everything. They do a lot of work to make sure that the person who's experiencing the coffee is no different and better than they were before the store was opened. Cool. All right, so now the reason why you probably came here. Has anybody read the book from Don Norman, The Design of Everyday Things? Yep. If you haven't, you should. He also has a book called Emotional Design, I believe. Talks about the emotion in everyday things. It's one of my favorites. So, yeah, well, cool. So whenever we're designing something for another human, which chances are everyone here is going to be doing that, the very first thing you want to do is you want to figure out, do you want to make joy go up, bring sadness down, maybe bring anger down? Do you want to induce fear? Do you want someone to be fearful? A lot of companies do that. Do you want to bring down disgust? Whatever it is, you have to think, what's the resulting emotion that I'm going for? How do I want people to feel when they interact with my brand or my product, whatever it is? How do you want them to feel? So for an example, has anyone ever been to Europe? A couple? You've seen these police cars? How does this make you feel when you see this police car? Neutral, nothing too crazy, right? So it's a little, you might want to make fun of them, but other than that, no emotions. And what about this one? It's a little more intimidating. Just a little more. And this is the old way of doing police cars in America. We have all black cars now, especially here in Texas. Actually, I drove by one today. All it had was lights, but not the lights on the top, lights in the windows. So you had no idea there was a car, and it was completely unmarked.
It wasn't the flat, like a lot of times they'll have the flat.
No, but that's bad too. Right? Because the whole point of the police is to protect and serve. And how can you do that if you can't even find them? Right? And that's why I like the one on the left, because it's bright colors, whether it's dark or not, you are able to go out and find someone if you need them to. Us Americans, we like to be more like Batman, where if you can't see us, that means we're doing our job. But yeah, these are meant to invoke emotions. One is meant to scare you, and one is meant to actually not make you feel anything. Yeah?
To be frank, the one for the auto actually has some sort of squinted eyes and a happy face. So some sort of joy there as well.
Do you have that thing where you see faces and everything? That's awesome. Yeah, it definitely looks like it's smiling. Versus this one looks like it has a goatee. All right, let's move on to search engines. So how do you guys feel when you see this, just a regular Google page?
Ready to search?
Yeah, neutral. You're not feeling happy, but you're also not feeling like scared, right? You're feeling neutral. And whenever you actually search for something, what Google does is it goes through and it takes hundreds of thousands of results, and it puts it in as best way as it can. So you'll see up at the top left, or maybe you can't, it says 647,000 results, and it puts the one that it thinks you want up there at the top. And if you decide to scroll all the way down to find out if pineapples float or not, you'll see down here at the bottom that it gives you all of the other pages, right? And it does it in a really cute way where it just spreads out the Google logo. Everyone's seen this. We've seen this for the last like 20 plus years, right? But nobody ever thinks about how all that design, the simplicity, is on purpose, because their competitors are a nightmare. If you were to look at something, or if you just wanted to search something, you go on to Bing, you're immediately drawn to the drone shutdown, or no same-sex marriage, acquitted to rape. They're just trying to grab your attention right away, and they do not care why you went to their website in the first place. They want you to read their clickbait. And this works the same with Yahoo and AOL, right? And compare all of those to this. Feel a lot of relief whenever you see that now, right? Because you've seen the other side. That's how a search engine should make you feel, is nothing. They should not make you feel overwhelmed.
Now it makes me happy.
Yeah, right? What about credit card activations? Could someone tell me what a typical credit card activation looks like?
Call the number.
Yeah, you have to call the number on the sticker,
Yeah.
type in all 16 digits, then well, sometimes if it's your bank, then you just have to type in the last four. But either way, you're calling, typing in numbers, having to verify, whatnot, and it says, okay, you're good to go. And you're like, I hope it works, right? Apple, just last week, they came out with a credit card. They made it very simple. They send you a card. You set it up on your phone. They send you a card, and in the card comes in this little thing right here. The card's in my wallet, otherwise it'd be in here. But what they do is they say, tap your phone to the bottom of this box. And then it says, hey, we found your card. Do you want to activate it? You say yes, and then you just say done. And that's it. And that's how you activate a card with Apple. And that's one of the ways that you remove frustration, any sort of friction, they've removed it. When you're thinking about your own products or services, I've laid out just a generic customer journey here. This is like a sign up, it's them shopping, it's them buying, it's them using, and then it's them looking for support. If you're looking at your own customer experience, whatever it may be, whether it's a macro from a customer learning about you in marketing, all the way to the end where they might need some help and support, or if it's a micro where it's just like a sign-up process through an app, you have to go through and define how you want someone to feel at every single part of their journey. Because if the journey is too bumpy, they will fall off before you want them to. They will not stay along for the ride, okay? So you want this. So if it's a sign up, do you want them to feel joy? If they're shopping, do you want to reduce fear? Like, they may not know what they're looking for, so help them. If they're buying, you want to reduce any trace of buyer's remorse, and then maybe congratulate them, make them feel better about it. Once they're using it, whatever the product may be, it could be a very simple thing or a very complicated thing. Either way, you need to make sure that they know how to use it before they unbox it. And then support, I don't know if any of you have worked with the support. I mean, Liberty, you just said that you ran one. I'm sure you can tell everybody in this room that support is nothing but taking away anger and disgust. That's all it is. You're trying to restore the relationship with your customer because they've experienced some sort of emotional turmoil between when they heard about you and when they're contacting you. And it is your job as a support representative to like take that away. This is my favorite quote. You can buy a customer's attention with ads, you can buy their interest with features, but you can never buy their heart. You can only earn their heart if you make sure that you put their emotions ahead of everything else along your entire journey. So now that we're talking about friction, there's 4 steps that we're going to talk about. Well, there's a lot of things that you can do to make sure that your product or service is going to be something that someone loves, but we're only going to talk about 4 of them today. So first one is getting rid of friction. Now I don't necessarily mean like typical product like UX friction. I'm talking about emotional friction. Anytime someone has to do any sort of emotional labor whatsoever for your product or service, whatever it may be, you need to remove it. You have to think of every possible reason why someone might not do something that you want them to do. Any sort of speed bump that would inhibit them from reaching the emotional result that you're going for. This covers a lot of different things. This is only a few that I can think of in a coffee shop a couple weeks ago. But there's a lot more. If someone doesn't have the right phone software, it's going to stop them from downloading your app. If they're in the wrong geography, they can't use your delivery service. If they don't have transportation, they can't get to your store. Whatever it may be, this is considered emotional friction because every single one of these speed bumps takes away the emotional reaction that you want them to have. You want them to feel good when they interact with your brand. You don't want them to feel like they're less than adequate if they run into one of these things and you don't have an answer for it. One of the best things, an old family friend of ours, she used to be the head of accessibility needs for Texas. Her name is Pat Pound. She's an amazing human being. She's blind. And what she does is she consults for companies and helps them create a more accessible version of their company. And one of the things that she told me, I think she had to go into like a local coffee shop. And she wasn't there to consult, she was just there to have coffee. And they welcomed service animals, of course, but they didn't have any way for a service animal to be held near their counter without it being a health risk. So they needed to have a completely different desk that they didn't have. So without seeing that this woman was blind and that she was holding on to a seeing eye dog, they told her to get out because they saw that the dog was close to and sniffing the little display of food and water that they might have right at that corner. And she's just like, it got me really thinking, like, nobody thinks about this stuff. Nobody. So that's my little shout out to Pat. If you don't think of anything else, think of those who have accessibility needs. So those are just speed bumps. That's friction. So think of anything that you can possibly do. The next thing you want to make sure that you don't do is you don't want to be apathetic. What that means is that apathy is pretty much directly connected with the phrase, well, it's always been done this way. That means that person doesn't care, right? You don't want to be apathetic when you're designing a product or a service. Any chance that you have to reduce any sort of negative emotion or that you can promote a positive one, you want to make sure that you do that. For example, Toys R Us. Toys R Us looks like a normal retail store, toy store, right? But in their design, I believe that it's pretty apathetic because as a kid, loved running around the halls and picking up the toys and like pretending all the shit on the ground were like landmines and you're jumping over it and it's a lot of fun. When you do that as an adult, they don't like it, right? And adults are the ones that are actually spending the money. The adults are the ones that are actually shopping, and they did not design the store for adults. Right? It's super overwhelming because every kid's toy has to be loud and bright in order to gain their attention. It's the whole point of a kid's toy is to keep their attention. When you have an entire store filled with this kind of stuff, it's very difficult for you to, as an adult, go through it without any sort of speed bumps. Yeah.
Don't you think that they are probably selling joy to their parents when they see their kid be happy?
I think that's a big risk. I think you should be able to make the buyer as well as the actual customer happy, right? And this is why, I mean, Toys R Us is no longer a business. I think they tried to reopen and it didn't go so well. But I think this is one of the reasons why is that the parents didn't want to go there. If they can just do it on Amazon, they're going to do that. But something that Amazon definitely can't compete with is an emotional tie. And Toys R Us has been around for a very long time. And what they could have done is invoked some sort of nostalgia, make it like bring all the stores back to like the 1980s when the parents were kids. Right, and say like, come on back and you can play, right? And make it some sort of emotional tie for the parents who are actually doing the shopping, and make it a moment for the parents as well as for the kids. But they didn't do that. They were apathetic. They were just like, well, this is how we've always done it, and there's no reason to change it, even though we've got folks like Amazon who are like breathing down our necks. No, not around. All right, so now we know to get rid of friction and not to be apathetic. So what do we do? Well, you want to make something immersive. Now, immersive does not mean build a box and stick them in it and just drown them in your brand. Immersive means removing any amount of distractions that you possibly can from your product or your product's experience. So, for example, we see these all the time. There's a few around the block here. What do you think a restaurant could do to reduce or to be more immersive here?
Have some greenery.
Have some greenery? Yeah. Something to block off the fact that they're literally in a sidewalk. Obviously, they're in a sidewalk. They want to be outside. That's the reason why they're outside. They're not outside to inhale the fumes of the cars going by or listen to whatever music someone is listening to while they're going down the sidewalk. I'm sure there are a lot of other weird situations. My wife and I were in Denver 2 weeks ago, and there was a nice guy who was playing cello, and it was gorgeous. But could you imagine if it wasn't gorgeous? And we had to be out there for like an hour and a half eating, right? So the restaurant doesn't control what happens on the street. It only controls what its brand is. But what it could do is do a little bit more to make it a little bit more immersive, right? So whether it's greenery or make it part of the waiter's duty to say, like, if anything bothers you, you let us know. Removing any sort of frustration that could occur, they could do that. Another thing is like unboxing. I don't know how many of you have bought something online before, but if the box is hard for me to open, I'm already frustrated with the product and I haven't even started using it yet, right?
Hermetically sealed.
Yeah, right? They feel like they're trying to keep it's like Fort Knox. It's just like, just let me have my like ab cruncher, Jesus.
That's why I like Apple and move.
Yeah, and I think it's more of like, especially if it's like workout gear, they're just saying like, you're not strong enough, you really need this product, but it's not helping. Yeah, like when it comes to unboxing, if your product isn't, if there's a lot of distractions like the shipping boxes, or whenever you have to pull it out and the battery is dead and you can't use it right away, that's considered a distraction for me. Not friction, but distraction. It's distracting them from the outcome that you want them to feel. So you want to be immersive. This basically stimulates all 5 senses.
So what does immersive mean?
I'm sorry?
What does immersive mean?
I'm saying that immersive is getting rid of all the distractions away from your product. It's kind of a...
At the moment of interaction, for example.
I'm sorry?
At the moment of interaction.
Yeah, at the moment of interaction. And if you can simulate all 5 senses, then perfect. That's kind of one of the things I say is movie theaters wouldn't be as effective if they had windows. So you got to think of your product as a movie theater. You might not be putting them in a box, but you want them to be completely infatuated with whatever you're selling them. So try to remove as many distractions as you can. Yeah?
So I've got an Apple Pencil here that I bought, and I just realized that it's so immersive that I've left the little tab on it that was there to pull it out of the box, and I still use it.
That's great. So the product, the packaging clearly didn't get in your way.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, and I kept the packaging.
Yeah. I have a big stack of Apple boxes at home. Got to figure out what to do with them. All right, so we learned that we have to remove friction. We cannot be apathetic. We have to be as immersive as you can. And the last of the 4 steps is to be intuitive, to make things intuitive. You do not want your product or service to be like an escape room. Nobody is trying to solve a puzzle to be able to use your product. You should be as intuitive as possible. So back to my roots, the Apple Store. It's pretty, but would you guys consider it intuitive? If you've ever shopped at a normal store before, you would notice that there's no checkout lines, nothing. People just take products off the wall, they take a photo with their phone, they walk out, and you're like, what the fuck is going on here? Right? It's not intuitive whatsoever. And that's why back in 2008, 2009, my job, I was a concierge when I first started, my job was to basically tell people how the Apple Store worked. That was it. People walked in, I welcomed them, how can I help you? Here for a Genius Bar appointment? Awesome, that's the huge thing down at the back. They don't even have a Genius Bar anymore. They call it the Genius Grove. So you don't even have that staple that you might have been used to, right? It's just tables and chairs. It's not intuitive.
And now it's all those little pod stools to come sit on.
Yeah, and they have you, yeah, we call them pee balls because you know how many kids have peed on them. Next thing is we got Japanese steakhouses. If anyone's ever taken someone out on a date to a Japanese steakhouse, and then when you get there, you realize, oh, we're sitting with other people? This isn't as romantic as I thought it would be. Then you know what I'm talking about. Japanese steakhouses, obviously, it's a communal table. You sit with strangers, or if you have a large party, good for you, have more friends than I do. But yeah, they cook the food right in front of you. But most people assume that you know what a Japanese steakhouse entails. And when you assume, and you're like, that's apathy. You don't want to be apathetic. You want to be as close to the newcomer as you possibly can be whenever especially if you're building the thing. You want to pretend that you're the newcomer every day that you work on something. Because the more you know, the less they're going to be able to figure out. You need to find a way to match their level of intelligence, if you will, about your product.
So you know, apathy was one of the things that didn't apply necessarily to the customer, but to the designer.
Yeah.
You're avoiding apathy.
Correct.
So are there other, and what you're describing now is empathy.
Mm-hmm.
So are there other ways that, not just thinking about what emotions we want to inspire in the user, but like what emotions we need to sort of embody as a designer to do a better job?
And that's kind of the whole point behind the purpose. Mm-hmm. Right? The purpose is there to kind of be your driving force. That's your North Star. So if you have a purpose like Apple or Disney or Starbucks where it's pointed towards the emotional outcome of a human being rather than the prettiness of a box or a store, then that's going to be the emotion that you're driving, right? And that you should have in your head when you're designing something. Is if Nike tried to do something and they weren't there to inspire athletes, if they built something and it wasn't there to inspire, then they're not doing their job. So that's kind of what I would say. Always go back to that purpose. If you don't have one, come up with one. Yeah.
So what about, because I'm always conflicted if it's just, I forgotten on your anger scale. It's definitely an annoyance, but sometimes it jumps up towards livid. When you go in a Walmart and it's just like overload of stuff. You know, versus if you go in a Target and you pretty much know the store's gonna be flipped to A or B, but you can pretty much find your way around the store and find things really easily. And I don't know if Walmart does that intentionally to keep me out of their stores.
I think what Walmart goes for above anything else is consistency, right? Just in Arkansas last week, home of Walmart, and we were in a Walmart, and it was a little different than the ones that we have here, but just slightly. And the only slight part was that it was a lot more outdoorsy. They had a lot more like sporting goods stuff than I've seen in our landlocked, you know, because you got a huge lake by their stores. Other than that, it was pretty consistent. And there's 70 Walmarts blocks away from each other in that area. And I think that's what they go for above everything else. So consistency doesn't always mean clarity. Like it can't be, it's not gonna be pretty every time. Target, on the other hand, I think it was back in the 90s, it was a guy named Ron Johnson. He wanted to make sure that Target was a place of clarity, that when people went in there, it wasn't stressful. And so he went and designed it to be that way. And then he got taken away to go start the Apple Store. And then he got taken away to go help JCPenney, and they did not like him. So they fired him pretty quickly. Okay, so yeah, so we've talked about removing friction, how not to be apathetic, what immersion means, or what I believe it to mean, and then how to be intuitive. And one of my favorite customer experiences that I've been through that embody all 4 of these is Walt Disney World. So I was hoping to walk through what a typical Walt Disney World experience looks like. Has anyone gone to Disney World in the last 10 years? Oh, cool. Awesome. And then those of you who haven't, have you been to Disney World ever?
Does Disneyland count?
Yes, only to a certain degree, because there's certain things I'll show you that are only a Disney World thing. But yeah, I'm actually going to Disneyland in 2 days, on Wednesday. So Walt Disney World, what they do, they have, well, obviously you got to buy tickets. So we'll talk about tickets for a second. So whenever you buy a ticket, it shows you a calendar, and it says this is how much your ticket will be on this day. And so it kind of takes the guesswork out of whether or not you're going to be spending, keeping within your budget. So if you want to spend less than $170, you got to go on a Monday through Thursday. If you don't care how much money you're spending, then you can go on a Friday or Saturday. So it just gives you, this is kind of similar to what airlines do too. They have a low fare calendar. It just tells you how much. They don't have to do this, but they do. You can just say Saturday and they'll tell you what the price is, and then you have to go back and hit Friday and see if that price is different. But they don't want to make you do that. They just tell you what it is. So, not too crazy. After you buy your tickets, though, that's when the fun starts. They usually send you something called a Magic Band. Has anyone played with a Magic Band before? Cool. So a Magic Band usually comes in a package like this. It has the name of all the people that are going with you to Disney World, so you don't have to guess whose band is who. And on each band, it has your information, like your first and last name, might have your birthday, has your credit card information. It acts as your key into the city, if you will. Once you have the Magic Band, then you got to travel to Disney, unless you live in Orlando, which we don't. So if you were to travel to Disney, this is where Disney could be apathetic, but they choose not to be. They know that if you're flying into Orlando and you're going to be staying at a Disney resort, well, they're going to send you some luggage tags. And those luggage tags are yellow, and they have a little Mickey Mouse on it. It has MK, that's for Magic Kingdom there. But you put that on your luggage, and then whenever the luggage comes off the plane, the airline knows to take all of the yellow tagged luggage and set it aside, and then they put it on a special bus that will take the luggage all the way to your hotel. And so all you have to do is get off the plane and onto a shuttle or into an Uber. You don't have to go get your luggage. It's pretty awesome. They did the hard work of working with every single airline and the International Orlando Airport to make sure that anybody that has that tag will have their luggage waiting for them in their hotel when they arrive. Pretty awesome. So you've done the traveling part, and now you make it to the hotel. Now, if you're staying at a Disney resort, They would have probably emailed you already to let you know that you don't have to check in at the front desk. You can go straight to your room, use your magic band as your key, and that will let you in. And any one part of your party will have that as their key. So you don't have to check in, you don't have to wait in line, you don't have to give them a credit card. They have all that information. And then if it's a special occasion, if it's like a honeymoon or an anniversary, birthday, they'll actually have stuff waiting for you. On top of the luggage that they already brought to your room, they'll have candies or swag waiting for you on the bed, just as an extra surprise. They'll say, happy birthday or welcome to your honeymoon. It's pretty awesome.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Of course.
Where does novelty fit into the basic emotions? Like, I know it's associated with joy, but like, I assume it was really.
Like when something is novel?
Yeah, like I assume it's associated with joy and surprise or whatever, but like it's listening to you say all these things, I mean, it's about Disney specifically, I mean, I've been traveling for 20 years, and you don't get this treatment anywhere, right?
Right.
I mean, you can be exact plot and everything, and this doesn't happen,
Right.
So, can you talk about novelty as an experience, and how does it just, or even just comment on how it fits into?
I could do my best. I would say that it's definitely within the spectrum of joy. And I don't know, I wouldn't be able to make up where it lands on that spectrum. But I would say that it's something, kind of like you said, you've been traveling for 20 years and nobody does this. That says a lot about the apathy of everyone else, right? Is that novelty is what we're feeling, but it's not how Disney is designing. They're not saying like we want this to be, we want people to feel novel about this. That's not what they're saying. They say we don't want people to feel like they feel about everybody else, right?
I think from a neuroscience standpoint also,
Yeah, this
it's,
is kind of
it's
going with
variable
this, yeah.
reward. So,
Okay.
you know, it's which is reinforces the behavior more so,
Right.
you know, than a predictable kind of, most transactions with businesses are kind of.
Yeah, that's
quid
kind of
pro
where I'm
Sure,
going.
gotcha,
I mean, that's
gotcha.
B2B, right?
Yeah.
And, novel, you know, you don't want to be so novel the way the software works.
Sure.
Right? But it does have this like powerful influence.
Feeling, yeah. You get a good reaction out of people.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Were you gonna say something?
I would put it as delight, and I remember somebody has a motto that says something like delight the customer or something like that.
Like one of the companies.
Some company in the.
Yeah, there's a few that say like surprise and delight. Chick-fil-A does the My Pleasure thing, but yeah. Surprise and delight is my favorite acronym because it spells sad. So yeah, so once you're done with the hotel, then you get to visit the parks. And this is the piece that everybody looks forward to. Nobody looks forward to the traveling. Nobody looks forward to receiving magic bands. Nobody really looks forward to hotels. They just do that special stuff for the betterment of your emotions. But the parks is where they really do their stuff. So when you arrive at the park, you use that same magic band that you got that you used to get into your hotel. You use that to get into the park. That is your ticket. Okay. When you arrive on Main Street. So you're greeted with all these people. You're greeted with really nice noise. It's music. It's usually like Dixieland type music, but it's a take on some sort of Disney song that you've heard 1,000 times. And it smells like freshly baked cookies. And not because there are freshly baked cookies anywhere, it's because they're actually pumping that smell. It's an artificial smell that they're pumping on Main Street. And every section of the park has its own distinct smell. So if you go to Adventureland, it smells like the tropics. If you go to Tomorrowland, it has a very distinct future smell, right? Frontierland smells kind of like a nice swamp, if you can imagine a nice swamp. But every single one of them, they're artificial smells, but what they're trying to do is immerse you completely. So they're trying to activate as many senses as they possibly can whenever you arrive. Even the walkway, it's not like typical cement. It's actually softer cement because they don't want your feet to hurt after walking on it all day. It's pretty nuts.
They also they have one of the, it's a little geeky, one of the most sophisticated mosquito abatement programs in the world.
I just read about that. Yeah.
Actually gets really.
There's no mosquitoes in Disney World.
And that's Orlando.
Yeah.
They're everywhere except at Disney.
Right. Yeah. It's pretty phenomenal. The fireworks smoke also helps a little bit. Okay, so once you've gone through Main Street and you're ready to ride a ride, you use that same magic band. They have something called Fast Pass, and they give you a few free Fast Passes each day, and when you run out, you can go and add some more to your band. But basically it means that you get to skip the line if you wanted to. So if you were to do that, you just tap your Magic Band, and as you've seen, every single place where you tap the Magic Band has a little Mickey Mouse and it glows. If you didn't do a Fast Pass, you'd be waiting in a queue. Now this is the queue. I took this photo on the opening day of the Pandora World. Those are people. And I'm in line for their ride called Flight of Passage. And that's not a typical, you will not see that line at Six Flags. That is not a typical line. What they do is they walk you through, you like enter a mountain, you go through a jungle, you enter a mountain, then you're surrounded by these cave drawings, you know, from the Avi people, I forget the Navi people. And then as you get deeper and deeper into the mountain, it starts to look more like a laboratory, and then you get taken directly into a laboratory. And it looks, this is a 9-foot animatronic in water. Looks real. They have all sorts of like awesome scientific equipment throughout the whole thing, and before you know it, you're on the ride and you didn't realize that you've been in line for 2.5 hours because it felt like you were just going through a museum with a bunch of people in a single file line, right? But what that's called, the psychological term for that is called occupy time. You might know it as time flies when you're having fun, right? But what it means is that if they are able to distract you, meaning, reduce distractions and completely immerse you into their experience, you will not even recognize how much time has gone by. So the line that you were afraid to spend 3 hours in didn't actually seem as bad as than it was. Probably my favorite part about Disney is all their queues. When you're done, you go eat, and you get to use that Magic Band again, using the super intuitive Mickey symbol to pay for your food. And you can go and add your food preferences to that. So if you pay for it and they're like, hey, you actually ordered something that has peanuts, we'll make sure that there's no peanuts on that.
How do they keep those bands secure? That just seems like a security nightmare to me.
It would seem like a security. They spent $1 billion, completely custom building it from the ground up. So nobody can, nobody can get into it except for Disney. And one of the cool things is that it's radio frequency, so if you lose a child and a child has it, they'll be able to find them in a second. My brother got lost when I was 5, and we spent half a day looking for him. Turned out he was just riding rides by himself. But he wouldn't have been able to go to Indiana Jones twice if we had the Magic Bands. Why do you think I have pictures of trash cans? What do you think Disney does with their trash?
Big feedback.
Lots and lots of theme park trash. We're talking gross Mickey-shaped foods.
Yeah.
And I'm saying gross because they're old at this point, half-eaten, maybe dropped on the ground. We're talking about dirty diapers. We're talking about just clothes that people had to use as a diaper and throwing that away. Lots of gross theme park trash. Well, these aren't actually real trash cans. One of them, if it has a gap under it, it is a real trash can. That's for recycling. If it doesn't have a gap, that means it goes into a system underground, and all of the trash shoots over by Splash Mountain. Not in Splash Mountain, just by Splash Mountain. So you will never see a janitor going and opening this up and picking out a huge thing of disgusting trash, and you won't have that smell, and you won't see them walking down Main Street with trash. You will never see someone carrying around a big thing of trash. You will see cast members pick up trash and throw it in there, but trash, it's just a tube of plastic, and you just throw it down and it goes in. So don't put a person in there. And then last, they end the day with a fireworks show. Every single night, they end the day with a fireworks show. And I don't know anyone who hasn't smiled or had some sort of feeling of wonder when they're watching fireworks. But yeah, they do a few different types of shows. And you can see how Cinderella's castle is different colored right now. There's a Cinderella's shadow right there, and there's some floating lanterns from Tangled, but they do a projection on the castle. It turns the castle into a bunch of different things from a bunch of different movies. So you basically get to watch this really well-designed projection show and fireworks show. It's very well choreographed. And that's how they end your day at Disney. So, recapping, for tickets, removing any sort of frustration of finding the cheapest ticket, right? when it comes, and fear that you're spending too much. When it comes to the magic bands, they're just trying to kind of give you relief that you don't have to worry about carrying any sort of credit cards or hotel keys or food preferences or tickets or anything. They just give you one thing and that's it. Right? So that's relief. Travel, obviously they could be apathetic, but they chose not to be. Hotel, same thing. They can just give you the same key that every other hotel gives you, but they chose not to do that. And for parks, they make sure that you don't see trash, make sure that you smell cookies. They make sure that if anything were to be lost, or anyone, you've got the magic band. They have a really good system to find lost items too. Fear, one of the top things, actually the first thing, if you're ever to go through a training at Disney as a cast member, the first thing that they talk to you about is safety. Safety is their number one thing. So they make sure that any ride has been run through a dozen times or more throughout the day without people. They remove frustration, and of course they add joy. So all that stuff together kind of secures their place as the happiest place on earth, right? And so that's kind of what we're here to do, is we're trying to make people happy with whatever our products and services are. But yeah, that's all I got for you guys. I did write a book. What you saw was a small chapter of that book, but I wrote it about businesses in general. Talk about the purpose behind businesses, how to be a leader with emotional intelligence. I talk about company culture, obviously products and services, what you saw today, and then the customer experience, wrapping all up in one large customer experience. So we have some copies back there if you want to pick one up. But thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
We can take questions.
Yeah, I'd love to
for
take
15
questions.
minutes or so.
Yeah, I got a couple, oh, sorry.
Sure.
Somebody with that.
Yeah.
It's obvious because going to Disney World, right, you're trying to inspire joy, but flipping that on its head, what about like something like funeral services? Are you just trying to kind of decrease all of the bad, right? Because I think there's part of our Western mentality that we're like, we just want to stay happy and we need to stay happy. So how can we like potentially sit in that? I think empathy is feeling sad with people, right? So how do you build for opposite experience?
Yeah, so empathy is understanding or feeling what someone else is feeling. And compassion is that same feeling, but you add an action. You want them to feel better. That's what compassion is. If you were to look at something like a funeral service or even a hospital, right, it might sound grim, but doctors and funeral directors have the same job, and it's all about bedside manner. If a funeral director isn't there picking up every piece, telling you every expectation that's coming your way, they're not doing their job. And sorry to bring down the room, but my mom passed away like 3 years ago. And we actually had 2 funeral services, one here in Austin and one in upstate New York. And I can tell you that the funeral director in Texas was 1,000 times better than the one up in New York. The one in New York was very hands-off, didn't give us much information. We had to keep contacting them, and it was obviously a little bit more complicated because we had to fly her all the way over there. But a funeral director here in town, he was like, here's everything that you absolutely are going to run into. All of your friends and family are going to say, like, if there's anything you need, please let us know. And they're going to be very sweet, and none of them are going to take it back if you actually ask them for help, but you have to be the one that asks for help. He gave us all the information that we needed, and it was one of the best experiences, if you can imagine, that I've been through, at least. Yes?
A couple of quick questions. What did you use to design the presentation?
Keynote.
And what's the?
Logitech.
Logitech. Last is, can you talk about some of the thinkers that kind of inspired you, like who's
Absolutely.
Inspired you?
100%. The doctor that I had mentioned, the psychologist I mentioned before, his name is Dr. Paul Ekman. He wrote my favorite book, which is Emotions Revealed, and it talks about every emotion, how he and his team came to the conclusion back in the 70s that we have 5 core emotions, and that facial expressions that correlate with each of those emotions are universal. So no matter where you go in the world, whether they are connected or not, they smile when they're happy, they frown when they're upset. Yeah, he's one of my favorites. And then, Disney has another favorite book of mine called Be Our Guest. It talks a lot about the stuff that we just went through, but a little bit more about the history behind Disneyland and what they had to do. I don't know if you guys knew, but Disney World is actually the second story of a building. The first story is called a utilidor, and that's where all of the cast members go. So you'll never see a cast member you'll never see Peter Pan in Tomorrowland or in Frontierland. It'll always be in Adventureland. And the reason how Peter Pan can do that by going from his break room over to the land that he belongs in, he goes technically underground, but it's the first floor. So I love that book.
What's the Disney book called again?
You said
Be Our Guest.
You said what was the name of the book?
It was Be Our Guest and Emotions Revealed. Those are my two favorites.
By Paul.
Paul Ekman. Yeah. Yeah.
So you mentioned you did a lot of research with a variety of other companies,
Mhm.
like Starbucks and Disney World and everything like that. What was that like getting in with those companies and telling them about your project and?
Yeah, actually, Starbucks was before the project. I was actually building an app that's similar to the Magic Band, but I wanted it to be in the real world, where when people walked into restaurants, they can be greeted by name and all their credit card information was there. I was trying to build that, and I think my account manager, he contacted the president of Starbucks, and he got us a phone call with him, and we talked for 3 hours about customer experience and what Starbucks is working to do. And then I met with the regional director here in Texas to go a little bit further. So that wasn't connected with this. I think the only one that was connected with this was Disney. Right when I got the book deal, I had reached out to the president of Walt Disney World because I wanted to quote him or maybe ghostwrite his foreword or something. And he wasn't available, but they had a customer experience summit that they invited me to a few weeks later, and so I got to mentor there and meet a bunch of Disney executives and walk through the underground palace of employees and break rooms and stuff, and that was neat.
What's the biochemical correlation between the 5 core emotions?
You mean which chemicals are?
Hormones that
Yeah, you found my weakness.
There's a lot of debate around that. There are usually several at once, so there's not
It's
really,
like a cocktail.
Yeah, people like to say oh, this is the love drug, and this is, but the reality is it's kind of a vast oversimplification.
Yeah, it's usually people think that dopamine equals joy, adrenaline means that you're feeling some sort of fear, but it's not just adrenaline. But I don't know much about the biology, the chemicals that are running through our veins. Yeah.
So when you were comparing companies with their top competitors,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I realized that was going on was one costs significantly more than the other. Microsoft is significantly cheaper than
Apple. Yeah.
But do you think that perhaps people when they go and they look at the sticker price, they're not thinking about their emotions as much as they should be?
Yeah, I think they're behaving on their emotions more than they should be, probably, right? So I feel happier when I buy an Apple product than I would if I were to buy an Android, because with Android, I don't know much about it, but I do know that it is it's for the people who like to mess with their stuff, right? More customization. Apple's kind of a one-size-fits-all, so very little on either side. So I actually have more relief with Apple than I do with Android, so I would gladly pay for that convenience over the other one. So I'm not thinking, I'm behaving on behalf of my emotions more so than I probably should be. And that's the kind of what Sparky and I were saying at the very beginning. Don't necessarily make decisions based off of logic all the time. Yeah.
Might there be a flip side of that situation? Because Microsoft is way cheaper. So when someone I'm from a developing country, when I'm buying a laptop in Colombia, I'm not thinking about pleasure, I'm thinking about fear of spending money.
Sure.
So I think that these utilitarian, maybe less emotional brands might have their own place in the market.
Absolutely. And yeah, I'm not saying that if you're not there to invoke joy at every corner, you don't deserve to exist. In no way would I say that. But with Microsoft, yeah, that's definitely one of the reasons why, well, even Dell, any sort of Microsoft vehicle, those are the types of people who aren't necessarily there to invoke joy at every turn, but they're there to invoke joy at every turn that they can. So I haven't had a PC in 20 years. but I would say that the reason why I don't want to go back is because I had a bad experience with Dell. We were definitely penny pinchers, and all I wanted was a computer, and so I saved up my money. I got a really cheap Dell laptop, and it broke within 3 months, and it cost a lot more money to go get it. So I just got more frustrated, and then when I got my first Apple, I didn't have to touch it for 5 years. I didn't have to get it like worked on.
Have you seen any relationship between applying some sort of this framework to your experience design or to your like product and increasing like expenses? Because it seems that you need like way more like, of course, research,
Resources.
understanding, way more like, in general investment and technology as well.
Yeah.
So is there a relation on this thing like being more high end than, like, for example?
I don't think they have to be high end. If what you're trying to achieve is reducing bad emotions or negative emotions and promoting good ones, I don't think you have to raise the price to do that.
Southwest, for example.
Southwest is a perfect example. They're one of my favorite companies. Troy, was it you that had someone had a story when they walked in about Southwest on their flight to DC. It was like 3 hours. Yeah, what can you tell us what the story was?
Yeah, I mean, the basic idea was that, I think it was a flight from Philly to DC that was delayed 3 hours, and the flight attendant started playing games with all the passengers so they wouldn't get pissed off, essentially. So playing, like games you can play as a kid.
Yeah, and they are by far the they're by far the least expensive airline, right? So you don't have to charge money in order to make people happy. Yeah, you had one.
So you talked a lot about like trying to not manipulate, but like influence certain emotions within the service journey, and you can kind of place more of an emotional premium on the product as a result.
Correct.
But what about something like earlier we had the example of Walmart, where maybe like negative news headlines, maybe they're violating labor practices or they pay their people barely minimum wage. Kind of how do those negative emotions that maybe are not about the core product itself or the core service journey itself, but maybe about the brand as a whole, play into those customer interactions? Or do people forget because, they get in front of the product and they're immersed and they're happy and they don't mind that maybe there's some child labor?
I don't think that people forget. Kind of like the Maya Angelou quote, right? You'll forget what people did and what they say, but you'll never forget how they made them feel. Like when I say United Airlines, most people immediately start thinking of that video of the guy getting dragged off. I actually had that video in this presentation up until yesterday. I chose to take it out. But yeah, there are a lot of things that you can never, like, I don't think United Airlines, when they're like, we're going to build a really great airline, was thinking like, what's going to happen in 20 years when a guy gets dragged off? Like, how do we handle that situation? They have no idea doing that. All they can do is they can point to their purpose, right? And say, are we acting within the bounds of what we went out to achieve in the first place, right? I don't know United's mission statement off the top of my head, but Southwest Airlines definitely puts people ahead of everything. And whatever decision that an employee makes, they make it through the filter of that purpose. And United didn't really have anything ironclad like that, and they definitely don't put people first. So that's why it was a little bit easier for them to get to the conclusion of like, we need you off this plane, whether you like it or not, come with us, and it turned into that whole ordeal. Yeah.
So that's interesting, because in the last week or so, we've had this 200 CEOs have signed up for this new mission something, right?
Yeah, where they said that the profits are no longer the...
And suppliers and community, and then, shareholders.
Yeah. Yeah, with that, for those of you who don't know, so 200 plus CEOs. It was headed by...
Business Roundtable?
Yeah, it was a Business Roundtable, yeah. I forget who the chairman is. I think it's JP Morgan, CEO of JP Morgan. Yeah, but him and 200 other CEOs, and we're talking about like Reed Hastings from Netflix, Tim Cook, all the, what's his face from Google, and they all signed it saying, we're putting all of these people ahead of our profits and therefore our shareholders, which I think was really interesting. I got a few text messages that day that said, hey, your book is making a difference. Sure like to think that Tim Cook's reading my book. Yeah. But yeah, that's it definitely seems like that's the way that everybody's going. Everyone's waking up to the fact that we're all human, and you don't necessarily have to manipulate someone to get a good thing out of them.
It might make sense in the long run, right? You might still get goodwill towards your products and.
Yeah. When you put people ahead of product, it's a much longer game. If you put product ahead of people, you're playing the short game, and that's fine. But you continue to do that, you're going to get stuck in that rut, and you can't get out of it. And then people are going to be leaving you for a company that makes them feel good. Yeah.
I'm curious about where you think shame fits in, because I do think, for example, the head of JP Morgan, maybe shame played a role in the way that CEOs are changing their behavior.
Quite possibly, yeah. So shame is a form of fear. So it's like sadness, but it's the loss of your reputation, right? So you're experiencing a loss of your reputation. Same with like embarrassment, kind of goes along the same lines. Whatever got them to sign it, I obviously don't know. I get really weird when it comes to shaming people, especially online, because if you make a mistake and you're at that level, billions of people will tell you in the most ugly way, because there's this like internet line between you and them. And so when it comes to like shaming people, I'm not a big fan of. But when people feel shame, sometimes it results in a good thing, sometimes it results in a bad thing, but normally it's not like an intrinsic motivation of theirs, it's definitely extrinsic.
I'm not advocating like shameful call-out culture, but
Sure.
I do think that collectively we have a lot of more knowledge about the separateness between and various financial realities.
Yeah,
right?
of course.
So yeah, I'm curious about just maybe that is a part of it, despite without having to I don't know, be violent or like aggressive.
Sure. There's normally when people are upset with with a brand, they'll say, I'm going to tell my friends about this, and I'm never going to use you again, right? And that's a customer's way of shaming you into doing what they want you to do. And some brands will fall for it, and some brands will not fall for it. And regardless of whether you fall for it or not, that customer feels hurt, and they're taking whatever approach they feel necessary to get what they think that they want. So when someone shames someone else, that's kind of where they're coming from. When it comes to like the other side, like on the receiving end, like the JP Morgan guy, probably wasn't his first pick to do this, but he's the chairman of this huge conglomerate of CEOs, and I think there's plenty of CEOs that are seeing like, oh, we can't just make costs lower and up profits all the time. We can do that for 10, 15 years maybe, but we can't do that for 30, 40 years. We have to start thinking the long game. And I think that's when they started like putting people ahead of the rest of their prices, their products, their places, all that stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think this, to your point, he was shamed in congressional testimony earlier this year. And I was thinking there's likely a cause and effect here, because it was, what do you call it? It's a bit of sensational news, right?
Sure.
How this congresswoman took him to task because Diamond could not explain how a secretary at JP Morgan can't afford to maintain even a very basic lifestyle, right? This congresswoman was zeroing in on this example, and Diamond had no answers. I wasn't aware that he was the CEO of this group of CEOs.
I think he's board of he's on the board.
Yeah. And I guess time will tell if this new edict that right?
Yeah, they can walk there. Sorry, they can talk all they want, but until they start walking.
So is
well,
this lip
Bob,
service,
yeah,
or?
Bob Iger's same thing. Disney CEO, but then has Disney cast members in Disneyland and Disney World sleeping in their car, and that's where they live. And yeah, there's a lot of turmoil happening there too. And like I said, some shame goes into good places, some shame goes into bad places. I think in the JP Morgan sense, I think that's a good outcome, regardless of how it got there, emotionally for him. I think it was a good outcome. And I'm sure that he had plenty of other CEOs egging him on to do it too, because they're already companies that do this, that put people ahead of product. Yeah.
So I'm curious, you've been talking about how you can use emotion to build a brand and a brand journey, but kind of we're all our own personal brands nowadays. So like, how would you say this could translate? Is there anything that you incorporate into your day-to-day life? Do you think about that, like using like an intuitive, immersive journey and your emotions intertwining and your personal interactions with people?
So like as an individual brand, what are some things that I do to make people feel good when they interact with me?
Yeah.
Cool. My wife is here, so I have to speak very carefully. But what I like to do is I like to anticipate people's needs ahead of that, before they recognize that they need something. And I like to get ahead of that. If there's a friend of mine or even a client of mine, if I know that they had a pitch or something last week, whether it's a sales pitch or whatnot, I want to follow up with them after they've gotten over whatever jitters and they're probably in self-doubt. And I contact them 24 hours later and I was like, how did it go? Or if I mentor a few managers around startups here. And if they have to have a hard conversation or fire someone, I make sure to give them, like, remind you this is how you do it, without like completely ruining your relationship with this person. And I check in with them afterwards to make sure that they're good. But it's a lot of anticipating others on a one-to-one basis. A lot of anticipating needs. I don't send gift baskets to people. I think it's a nice thing that a lot of people can get away with. I can't get away with it. It just seems natural for me to bribe someone to like me. Yeah, I just want it to be intrinsic for me. So, but I'm considered an asshole in my group of friends, so probably not the best person to give you advice on that. Right on. Any other questions? No, it's okay.
In the workplace, like too, like when you're not necessarily always like friends with everybody, but you're like trying to be like a good teammate and employee.
I'd say if you can see through bullshit, they can see through bullshit. So as authentic as you possibly can be. Sometimes authenticity means leaning over to someone that you don't know during a company meeting and be like, this sucks, right? And that authenticity gets you that relationship right away. If you're like, man, this is a lot of fun, and they're like, no, it's not. They're gonna be like, you're fake. I don't want to talk to you, right? That people want people kind of like the joy. People want to feel safe. They want to feel like they can trust. So authenticity gets you that. But sometimes you have to think outside the box to make that happen.
Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you,
There's
guys.
an interesting thread throughout all of this. You guys, it's that emotions are also social. And so, when you share joy, you get joy back. When you share anger, you get anger back. And, like you pointed to, where a lot of this comes from is if you set the purpose, so if you set your personal purpose, your personal brand purpose, or your company purpose, and you truly let that guide everything that you do, it's not just about, here's a user at the gate of my experience, and that's where I'm going to pour all the emotion. It's everything else that interweaves in how you treat your employees and the minds, as you pointed out, the mindset that you have when you're designing it, that you're embodying those emotions as well. So I think it's a good cue for us as designers that it's not just about, I'm going to manipulate that person into feeling joy. It's, I want, because of this purpose, I want them to feel that. That's when you're really successful, is that you're not just saying, oh, well, at that point, I'm going to make them feel joy the rest of the time, and all my employees and everybody else, screw them.
Right.
But I give them that joy, and they'll give me the money, isn't really how it works.
Yeah. It's a great way. Great way to put it. Well, awesome, guys. Thank you so much.
Good job.
Thank you so much for being there.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. A great crowd and a great show.
Yeah, as engaging as you guys said.
Yeah. These people definitely come to learn, and they're not afraid to ask questions. This always happens to me. I think I've got 30 minutes of content, and then like when
Well,
you go through this
after
crowd,
I emailed you guys, I started going through and like and doing